Savannah Reed disappeared while pregnant because the baby belonged to one of the most feared Mafia bosses in America. For almost 7 years, nobody in the small town of Briar Glen knew who Savannah Reed really was. To her neighbors, she was just a quiet woman at the edge of town who worked part-time at a local bookstore and spent the rest of her days taking care of her son. She kept her head down, avoided crowded places, and never stayed anywhere long enough to build real friendships. People noticed that she was polite, but distant. She smiled when necessary, thanked people when they held doors open for her, and always left before anyone could ask too many questions. Her small white house sat near the woods, far from the center of town. It was old, with cracked paint around the windows, and a porch that creaked whenever someone stepped on it. But Savannah liked it that way. The isolation made her feel safe, or at least safer. Every morning, she followed the same routine. She woke before sunrise, checked every lock in the house, pulled the curtains aside just enough to look outside, and made sure no unfamiliar cars were parked nearby. Only after she convinced herself that everything looked normal did she wake her son. His name was Eli. He was 6 years old, bright, curious, and far too observant for his age. He had dark hair, sharp gray eyes, and a small birthmark behind his left ear that Savannah tried very hard to ignore. It was not an ordinary birthmark. It curved like a crescent with a thin line through the center, almost like a strange symbol carved into the skin. Savannah had seen that mark once before, years ago, on another person, Roman DeLuca. Even thinking his name made her chest tighten. She had spent years trying to bury that part of her life. She had changed cities, changed jobs, changed her appearance, and even changed the way she spoke. She never used her real birthday on official forms. She never posted photographs online. She never let Eli play outside for too long. Fear had become part of her daily routine. Still, Eli knew nothing about any of it. He saw his mother as someone strong, someone who always knew what to do, someone who packed his school lunches with little notes inside and read to him every night before bed. He never noticed the way her hands trembled when the mail arrived or how she froze whenever someone knocked on the door unexpectedly. On cold mornings, Savannah would sit at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee while Eli colored pictures beside her. Those were the moments she loved most. The quiet moments, the ordinary ones. Because ordinary was the only thing she had ever wanted. One afternoon, after school, Eli came running to the front door with dirt on his shoes and excitement in his eyes. He carried a piece of paper in his hand and proudly held it up for Savannah to see. It was a family tree assignment. Savannah's smile disappeared for just a second. The paper had empty spaces for names. Mother, father, grandparents. Eli looked up at her with innocent curiosity. He had started asking questions recently. Small questions at first. Why did other children have fathers at school events? Why did he not have any baby pictures with a dad in them? Why did his mother always look sad when he asked where he came from? Savannah always found ways to avoid the truth. She told him his father was gone. She said some people were not meant to stay. She said what mattered was that he was loved. But children always wanted more than that. That afternoon, she gently took the paper from his hands and told him they would work on it later. Eli accepted the answer, but she could see the confusion in his face. That confusion stayed with her for the rest of the day. That night, after Eli fell asleep, Savannah sat alone in the living room with old photographs spread across the table. Most of them were recent. Pictures of Eli at the beach. Eli on his first day of school. Eli holding a pumpkin at a fall festival. But hidden beneath those photographs was one picture she had never been able to throw away. It showed a younger version of herself standing beside Roman DeLuca. He looked tall, cold, and powerful even back then. He wore a black suit and a silver watch, and his expression was unreadable. But one hand rested on the small of Savannah's back. That tiny detail had once meant everything to her. There had been a time when she believed Roman loved her. There had been a time when she believed he could protect her. But love meant nothing in Roman's world. His world was full of violence, loyalty, money, and blood. Men disappeared without warning. Families turned against each other. Trust was treated like weakness. Savannah had learned that too late. Years ago, when she discovered she was pregnant, she had made the hardest decision of her life. She had run. She had not left because she stopped loving Roman. She had left because she was terrified of what would happen if she stayed. Someone inside Roman's world had discovered her pregnancy. Someone dangerous. Someone who believed the child would become a threat one day. Savannah never found out exactly who it was. She only remembered the warning. Run before they find out. So she disappeared overnight. She left behind everything she owned, changed her last name, and drove across 3 states without telling anyone where she was going. By the time Roman realized she was gone, she had already become someone else. At least that was what she hoped. A loud sound outside pulled Savannah back to the present. She looked toward the window. Nothing, just the wind. Still, something felt wrong. Over the next few days, little things started happening. A man she had never seen before appeared inside the bookstore and spent almost an hour pretending to look at magazines without buying anything. Another unfamiliar car parked across the street from her house one evening and remained there until after midnight. One morning, Savannah found muddy footprints near the side gate of her backyard. She told herself she was overreacting. Fear had a way of making ordinary things seem dangerous. But then something happened that she could not explain. Late Friday afternoon, Savannah picked Eli up from school. As they walked toward her car, she noticed a woman standing near the playground fence. The woman wore dark sunglasses and a long beige coat. She looked too polished for a town like Briar Glen, too perfect, and she was staring directly at Eli. Savannah immediately pulled him closer. The woman did not smile. She did not wave. She simply turned and walked away. Savannah's heart pounded the entire drive home. That night, she checked every window twice. She made Eli sleep in her room. She kept the lights off and listened carefully to every sound outside. Around midnight, she finally drifted to sleep on the couch. The next morning, she woke to find the front gate open. Savannah was certain she had locked it. She stepped outside slowly, scanning the yard. Everything looked normal, except for one thing. A small black box sat on the porch. Her breathing stopped. For a long moment, she could not move. Then she forced herself closer. The box was neatly wrapped with no address and no name. Inside was a single silver toy car. Savannah stared at it in horror. Years ago, Roman had once given her the exact same toy car after she mentioned wanting children someday. He had said it would be the first gift for their future son. She had never told anyone that story. Nobody else could have known. Her hand shook so badly that she almost dropped the box. Inside, beneath the toy car, was a folded piece of paper. No signature. No message. Just 3 words. I know everything. Savannah stumbled backward. For years, she had convinced herself that she was hidden, safe, forgotten. Now she realized she had been wrong. Someone had found her. She rushed inside, locked the door, and grabbed Eli from the living room. He looked confused as she hurried him upstairs and started packing bags into old suitcases. He asked where they were going. She could not answer, because she did not know. All she knew was that they needed to leave before it was too late. But as the sun disappeared and darkness covered the quiet street outside, Savannah made a mistake of looking to the front window one last time. A black SUV was parked across from her house, and someone was sitting inside, watching. Roman DeLuca discovers that a hidden child may carry the same rare birthmark as his bloodline. The black SUV remained outside Savannah's house for less than 10 minutes. Then it disappeared into the darkness without a sound. But hundreds of miles away, inside a towering estate surrounded by armed guards and iron gates, the man inside that SUV had already sent his report. Roman DeLuca stood alone in his office, staring out the city skyline through a wall of glass windows. The lights of Chicago stretched endlessly into the distance, but Roman barely noticed them anymore. He had spent so many years at the top that power no longer impressed him. Fear did, and there were very few people left in the world who could make Roman DeLuca afraid. At 42 years old, Roman had become more than just a mafia boss. He was a name that judges whispered, a shadow that businessmen feared, and a man powerful enough to make entire families disappear with one phone call. His empire stretched across several states. He owned nightclubs, hotels, shipping companies, casinos, and construction firms. Some of them were legal. Most of them were not. He controlled politicians, police officers, and judges. He had men in every major city who would kill for him without asking questions. Rivals feared him because Roman never forgave betrayal. If someone crossed him, they did not get a second chance. That was what made Savannah's disappearance so unusual. Nobody had ever walked away from Roman DeLuca before. 7 years earlier, she had vanished without leaving behind a single clue. No bank records, no phone calls, no family contacts. It was as if she had simply stopped existing. Roman had searched for months. At first, he thought she had been kidnapped by one of his enemies. Then he thought she might have left because she was scared of his world. But as time passed, even his best investigators found nothing. Eventually, people stopped mentioning her name around him. But Roman never forgot. He kept one photograph of Savannah locked inside the bottom drawer of his desk. Nobody knew about it, not even his closest men. In the picture, she was laughing. It was one of the rare moments when Roman had seen her truly happy. Her hair was blowing the wind. Her eyes were bright, and her hand was reaching toward him just as the picture was taken. Roman had looked at that photograph more times than he would ever admit, because despite everything he had become, Savannah Reed remained the one thing he had never been able to replace. The sound of the office door opening pulled him back to the present. His head of security, Vincent Moretti, stepped inside without speaking. Vincent had worked for Roman for nearly 15 years. He was loyal, careful, and smart enough to know when Roman wanted silence. He placed a thin file folder on the desk. Roman did not look at it immediately. Instead, he slowly turned away from the window. Vincent's face remained serious. That alone told Roman the information mattered. For the first time in years, they had found something. Roman opened the file. Inside were several photographs taken from a distance. A small white house, an old pickup truck parked outside, a woman carrying grocery bags. Roman froze. Even after all those years, he recognized Savannah instantly. She looked older, tired, more fragile than before. But it was her. For a long moment, Roman said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on the photograph. Then he noticed a child standing beside her, a young boy with dark hair and gray eyes. Roman's jaw tightened. The boy looked familiar in a way Roman could not explain. Vincent finally broke the silence. The woman had been living under a different last name in a small town called Briar Glen. She worked at a bookstore. She kept to herself. She moved several times over the years before finally settling there. Roman continued staring at the photograph of the boy. There was something about the child's face, something in the eyes, something in the shape of the mouth. A strange feeling settled inside his chest. Vincent pulled out another photograph. This one was blurry, taken from farther away. The boy was standing near a playground, turning his head slightly to the side, and just behind his left ear was a mark. Roman stepped closer. His entire body went still. The birthmark was small but impossible to mistake. A crescent shape with a thin line running through the middle. Roman had the exact same mark on his shoulder. So had his father and his grandfather before him. For generations, the men in the DeLuca family had carried that mark. Roman slowly lifted his sleeve and looked down at his own shoulder. The same shape, the same line, the same blood. For the first time in years, Roman felt something stronger than anger. Hope. But hope was dangerous, because hope meant there was something left to lose. Roman placed the photograph down very carefully. He asked Vincent one question. How old was the boy? Vincent answered quietly. 6 years old. Roman looked away. The room suddenly felt smaller. Savannah had disappeared 7 years ago. The timing fit perfectly. For years, Roman had believed she ran because she was afraid of him. Now another possibility entered his mind. She had been pregnant. The realization hit him harder than he expected. Savannah had carried his child and hidden him from the world. Roman walked back toward the window, but this time the city outside looked different. For years, he had buried every part of himself that felt human. He had become colder, harder, and more ruthless because that was the only way to survive in his world. His father had taught him that weakness got people killed. Love was weakness. Trust was weakness. Family was weakness. Roman had listened. He had built an empire by refusing to care about anyone. But Savannah had always been the exception, and now there was a child, his child. Roman closed his eyes for a brief moment. He remembered the night Savannah told him she wanted children one day. They had been sitting on a balcony overlooking the city. She had laughed and said she wanted a little boy with dark hair and stubborn eyes. Roman had told her that if they ever had a son, he would give him everything Roman never had: a safe life, a normal life, a father. But none of that had happened. Instead, Savannah had run away, and Roman had spent years convincing himself that she had never loved him. Now, he realized something much worse. She had probably left because she was trying to protect the child. That thought stayed with him for the rest of the night. Around 2 a.m, Roman entered the private section of his estate where very few people were allowed. Hidden behind a locked door was a room that looked untouched by time. Inside were old records, photographs, and personal belongings that Roman had never thrown away. He opened a wooden box near the back of the room. Inside was a small silver toy car. He stared at it for several seconds. Years ago, Savannah had once stopped outside a toy store window and pointed at a similar car. She had smiled and said it looked like something their future son would play with one day. Roman had bought it for her the next morning. He had kept it ever since. Slowly, he closed the box again. His expression turned cold. Because if Savannah had hidden his son for all these years, then she had not been hiding from him alone. She had been hiding from someone else. Someone dangerous enough to make her disappear overnight. Roman returned to his office before sunrise. Vincent was still there, waiting quietly. Roman looked down at the photographs one last time. The child had his eyes. Savannah had spent years trying to erase Roman from that boy's life. But blood could not be erased. Roman finally spoke. His voice was calm, but there was something dangerous beneath it. He told Vincent to gather every file, every photograph, every piece of information they had on Briar Glen. He wanted names. He wanted timelines. He wanted to know who had helped Savannah disappear. Most of all, he wanted to know who had frightened her enough to run. Because if someone had threatened his son, Roman would burn entire cities to the ground to find them. Then he picked up the photograph of the boy one final time and stared at the birthmark behind his ear. Roman ordered his men to bring him every detail about the child. Savannah once discovered that someone inside Roman's own Mafia family wanted her unborn child dead. While Roman's men searched through every detail of Savannah's hidden life, Savannah herself sat awake in the darkness of her bedroom, unable to stop thinking about the past she had spent years trying to forget. Eli was asleep beside her, unaware that everything around him was beginning to collapse. Savannah looked at his face in the dim light and felt the same fear she had carried ever since the day she learned she was pregnant, because the truth was simple. She had never run from Roman. She had run from the people around him. Years earlier, before Roman became one of the most feared men in America, Savannah Reed had been nothing more than a college student working nights at a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago. She came from a normal family. Her father had owned a small repair shop. Her mother worked at a school cafeteria. Savannah's life had always been simple, predictable, and safe. Then Roman DeLuca walked into the hotel lobby. At the time, Roman was already powerful, but he had not yet reached the level of influence he held now. He was younger, sharper, and more reckless. Men followed him everywhere. People stepped aside when he entered a room. But Savannah noticed something different about him. He always looked alone. The first time they met, Roman had come into the hotel late at night after a business meeting. Savannah was working behind the front desk. Most people avoided looking Roman directly in the eye, but Savannah did not. She asked him if he wanted coffee, because he looked tired. Roman stared at her for several seconds, almost confused by the question. Nobody ever asked him simple things like that. Most people wanted something from him: money, protection, power. Savannah wanted nothing. That was what caught his attention. Over the next few weeks, Roman started showing up at the hotel more often. Sometimes he had meetings there. Sometimes he sat in the restaurant alone. Sometimes he simply walked through the lobby and found excuses to stop near the front desk. Savannah tried to ignore the growing connection between them, but it became impossible. Roman was dangerous, but he was also charming in a quiet way. He remembered details about her life. He listened when she spoke. He noticed things other people missed. For the first time in years, Roman allowed himself to care about someone. Their relationship stayed secret from the beginning. Roman never took Savannah to public places. They met late at night, far away from cameras and reporters. He brought her to hidden restaurants, private apartments, and quiet rooftops overlooking the city. Savannah knew Roman lived in a world she could never fully understand. His phone rang at strange hours. He disappeared for days without explanation. Sometimes he showed up with bruised hands or blood on his shirt. Whenever Savannah asked questions, Roman told her less than she wanted to know. He said it was safer that way. At first, Savannah believed him. She convinced herself that love could survive secrets. But the deeper she became involved with Roman, the more she realized how dangerous his life truly was. Roman had enemies everywhere. Rival mafia families wanted his territory. Police wanted evidence against him. Men inside his own organization wanted his power. Every week, there were rumors of betrayals, disappearances, and violence. Savannah heard names she did not recognize. She saw strange men watching Roman from across the street. She noticed the bodyguards following him everywhere. Roman tried to protect her from that world, but he could not keep it completely hidden. One night, Savannah arrived at one of Roman's private apartments and found blood on the floor near the front door. Roman stood in the kitchen with a cut across his cheek and bruises on his hands. He claimed it was nothing serious. But Savannah knew better. She realized that loving Roman meant living beside violence forever. Still, she stayed, because despite the danger, Roman made her feel something nobody else ever had. Safe. He was cold to the rest of the world, but different with her. Softer, more patient, more human. Savannah saw parts of Roman nobody else saw. She saw the boy he used to be before power changed him. She saw the loneliness he carried. And slowly, she fell completely in love with him. Months later, Savannah discovered she was pregnant. At first, she could barely believe it. She sat alone in her apartment bathroom staring at the test in her hands, feeling both terrified and happy at the same time. For one brief moment, she imagined telling Roman. She imagined his reaction. She imagined him smiling for the first time in months. But that moment never came, because before Savannah could tell him, something happened that changed everything. A few days later, while Roman was away handling business in New York, Savannah visited one of his private houses to wait for him. She had done it many times before. The guards knew her. Nobody questioned her. But that night, while walking through the hallway, she heard voices coming from Roman's office. At first, she did not pay attention. Then she heard Roman's name. Savannah stopped near the door. The voices inside belonged to two men. One of them was Roman's cousin, Vincent DeLuca. The other voice belonged to a man Savannah had never met. They were discussing Roman's future. They spoke about his empire, his enemies, and the possibility of him getting married someday. Then the conversation shifted. Vincent said something Savannah would never forget. He said Roman could never have a family because a wife and child would become weaknesses. The other man agreed. Then Vincent laughed quietly and said that if Roman ever got a woman pregnant, the problem would need to be handled before the child was born. Savannah felt the blood drain from her face. She stood frozen outside the office door, barely able to breathe. Then Vincent said one more thing. He said Roman would never choose love over power. And if he had to choose, the woman and child would disappear. Savannah left the house immediately. She spent the entire night driving through the city, trying to convince herself that she misunderstood what she heard. But deep down, she knew the truth. Someone inside Roman's family would never allow that baby to live. The next morning, she tried calling Roman. He did not answer. She called again later. Still nothing. By the time Roman finally called. Back that night, Savannah was too afraid to tell him the truth. What if Vincent was right? What if Roman saw the baby as a weakness? What if the child became a target the moment Roman found out? Fear slowly replaced love. Over the next few weeks, Savannah became distant. Roman noticed a change immediately, but she refused to explain it. He thought she was angry. He thought she wanted space. He had no idea she was carrying his child. Then one night, Savannah returned to her apartment and found that someone had broken inside. Nothing valuable was missing. No money, no jewelry. But one thing had changed. A framed photograph of Savannah and Roman had been smashed on the floor, and written across the bedroom mirror in black marker were 4 words: "Leave before it's too late." Savannah broke down. For the first time, she understood that this was no longer just fear. Someone was watching her. Someone knew. That same night, she packed a bag, withdrew all the money from her account, and left Chicago without telling anyone. She drove until sunrise. Then she kept driving. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into years. Savannah changed her name, moved from city to city, and never stayed in one place too long. Part of her always believed Roman would eventually find her. Another part feared someone else would find her first. For years, she wondered if Roman ever searched for her. She wondered if he hated her for leaving. She wondered if he ever knew the truth. But now, after seeing the black SUV outside her house, Savannah realized something far worse. Roman was not the only one looking for her anymore. Because if Vincent DeLuca had once wanted her unborn child gone, there was a good chance he still did. And men like Vincent never forgot unfinished business. Roman sees the child's birthmark for the first time and instantly knows the boy is his son. After the black SUV disappeared from outside her house, Savannah did not sleep again. By sunrise, 2 packed bags sat near the front door. She had already filled the car with clothes, food, cash, and every important document she owned. She planned to leave Briar Glen before noon. But leaving was not as easy as it had been years ago. Back then, she had only needed to protect herself. Now she had Eli. A 6-year-old child could not disappear quietly. Children asked questions. They cried when they were scared. They noticed when adults lied. Eli sat at the kitchen table eating cereal, while Savannah moved nervously around the house. He looked up at her with confusion. She had not let him go outside. She had not turned on the television. She kept looking through the curtains every few minutes as if she expected someone to appear. Even Eli could tell something was wrong. Savannah tried to act calm, but fear had already taken over her thoughts. She knew she needed to leave. The problem was that fear made people make mistakes. At 10 in the morning, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Savannah stared at it until the ringing stopped. A few seconds later, a message appeared on the screen. "You can run again, but this time he will follow." Her stomach twisted. There was no name attached to the message, but she did not need one. Someone wanted her afraid. Someone wanted her to know she was trapped. Savannah immediately turned off the phone and removed the battery. Then she grabbed Eli's jacket and told him they were leaving. But before they could get into the car, Eli stopped near the front porch. His small face tightened with discomfort. He said his arm hurt. Savannah looked down and noticed that he had fallen the previous day while playing near the school playground. His elbow was swollen and bruised. At first, she wanted to ignore it, but then guilt hit her. Eli had already spent his entire life moving from place to place because of her fear. He had no friends, no real family, and no idea why his life was always changing. She could not let him suffer because she was panicking. So instead of leaving town immediately, Savannah made one final mistake. She took Eli to the small urgent care clinic near the edge of Briar Glen. The building was quiet, with only a few cars in the parking lot. Savannah kept looking over her shoulder as they walked inside. Everything felt wrong. Every stranger looked suspicious. Every sound made her heart race. She signed Eli in under the fake last name she had been using for years and sat beside him in the waiting room. Across the room, an older man pretended to read a newspaper. Near the front desk, a woman sat scrolling through her phone. Everything seemed normal, but Savannah could not shake the feeling that she was being watched. At that exact moment, a black SUV entered Briar Glen. Roman DeLuca sat in the back seat, staring out the window as the town passed by. The place looked exactly like the kind of town Savannah would choose. Quiet streets, small shops, old houses, nothing flashy, nothing expensive, a place where nobody asked questions. Roman had not planned to come himself. Normally, he would have sent men to handle something like this. But this was different. For 7 years, he had imagined what he would do if he ever found Savannah again. He had imagined anger. He had imagined betrayal. He had imagined demanding answers. But now that he was finally here, none of those feelings mattered. Because there was a child. His child. Vincent sat across from him inside the SUV, holding another folder filled with information. Savannah had used fake names in 3 different states. She had worked small jobs, paid everything in cash, and avoided leaving a paper trail. Roman almost admired how hard she had fought to stay hidden. Almost. The SUV slowed near the town center. Roman looked outside and saw children walking with their parents, teenagers riding bicycles, and families eating lunch outside small restaurants. Normal people, normal lives, things Roman had never really known. Then the driver's voice broke the silence. He said Savannah's car was parked outside a medical clinic nearby. Roman's heartbeat slowed. Without speaking, he stepped out of the SUV. The clinic stood across the street. Its glass windows reflected the bright afternoon sun. Roman entered quietly. Nobody inside recognized him. To the people of Briar Glen, he looked like an expensive businessman in a dark coat. But the second he stepped inside, he saw her. Savannah sat in the corner of the waiting room, beside a small boy. For a moment, Roman could not move. She looked almost exactly the same. Older, yes. More tired, but still beautiful in the same quiet way he remembered. Her hair was longer now, her face softer, but her eyes still carried that same sadness. Then Roman looked at the boy beside her. The child sat with one leg, swinging nervously beneath the chair. He held a toy dinosaur in one hand and looked around the room with curious gray eyes. Roman felt something shift inside him. The boy looked so much like him that it was almost painful. Savannah suddenly turned her head. For one terrible second, her eyes met Roman's across the room. Everything inside her froze. Roman. He was standing only a few feet away. Savannah immediately stood up. Her entire body went cold. She grabbed Eli's hand tightly and turned toward the exit, but Eli pulled away. He had dropped his toy dinosaur on the floor. Before Savannah could stop him, he bent down to pick it up. As he turned his head, the light from the waiting room window hit the side of his neck. Roman saw it clearly. The birthmark. A crescent shape with a thin line through the middle, exactly like his own. The room disappeared around him. For years, Roman had doubted himself. He had wondered if he was imagining things. He had told himself not to hope too much. But now there was no doubt. That child was his son. Roman could not stop staring. His face remained cold, but inside, everything was breaking apart, because the boy was real. He existed. Roman had a son. Savannah saw the look in Roman's eyes and knew immediately what had happened. The truth was exposed. There was no hiding anymore. She grabbed Eli's hand and rushed toward the door. Roman did not stop her. He could have. He could have blocked the exit, called his men, forced her to stay. But he did not move, because despite everything, he could see the fear in her face. Not hatred, not anger, fear, and that frightened him more than anything else. Savannah reached the parking lot with Eli beside her. Her hands shook so badly that she almost dropped the car keys. Eli looked up at her, confused and frightened by the panic in her voice. She opened the car door and pushed him inside. Then she looked back toward the clinic. Roman was standing just inside the entrance, watching her. He still had not moved. The distance between them felt enormous. 7 years of lies. 7 years of fear. 7 years of unanswered questions. Roman's face remained unreadable, but his eyes said enough. He knew. Savannah got into the car and drove away. Her breathing was uneven, her vision blurred. She kept looking in the rearview mirror. At first, the road behind her was empty. Then, several minutes later, she saw it, a black SUV. Not too close, not too far. Following her, Roman secretly followed Savannah home. Savannah realizes Roman already knows the truth and maybe planned to take her son away. The black SUV stayed behind Savannah's car the entire drive home. It never came too close. It never tried to pass, but it remained there, like a shadow she could not escape. By the time she pulled into the driveway, her hands were trembling so badly that she could barely turn off the engine. Eli looked confused from the back seat. He asked who the man at the clinic was. Savannah could not answer. She told him to go inside and stay away from the windows. He obeyed, but he kept looking back at her with frightened eyes. Savannah remained in the car for several seconds after Eli went inside. She watched the black SUV stop near the end of the road. It stayed there, waiting. The driver never stepped out. Roman never appeared. But Savannah knew he was inside, watching, thinking, planning. For years, she had imagined this moment. She had always believed that if Roman ever found out about Eli, he would be angry, furious. He would accuse her of betrayal. He would demand answers. But after seeing his face at the clinic, Savannah realized something worse. Roman had not looked angry. He had looked hurt, and hurt people were often far more dangerous. Savannah rushed inside the house and locked every door. Then she closed all the curtains, turned off the lights in the living room, and checked every room twice. Eli sat quietly on the couch, holding his toy dinosaur. The silence between them felt heavy. Finally, Eli asked a question Savannah had been dreading for years. He asked if the man at the clinic was his father. Savannah froze. For a moment, she could not breathe. She looked at Eli and saw the fear in his face. But there was something else, too. Hope. That was what broke her heart. Because no matter how hard she had tried to protect him, Eli had grown up feeling the empty space where a father should have been. Savannah sat beside him and pulled him close. She told him that some people were complicated. She said there were things she would explain when he was older. But Eli was no longer satisfied with half-truths. He said the man at the clinic looked at him like he already knew him. Savannah closed her eyes. Because he had. That night, Eli fell asleep early, exhausted from the fear and confusion of the day. Savannah carried him to bed, tucked him under the blankets, and sat beside him for nearly an hour. She watched him breathe. She looked at the small birthmark behind his ear, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to think about Roman without anger, because the truth was something she had spent years trying to bury. Part of her had never stopped loving him. Even after she ran, even after the threats, even after all the fear, there had been nights when she missed him so much that it physically hurt. Nights when she remembered the way he used to look at her, the way he used to touch her hand when he thought nobody was watching, the way he would grow strangely quiet whenever she talked about having a family someday. Roman had never been good at expressing emotions, but with Savannah, he had tried. That was what made everything so painful. She never knew if she had made the right decision by leaving. Some nights she convinced herself she had saved Eli's life. Other nights she wondered if she had stolen something important from both of them. Now there was no more time to wonder. Roman knew, and once Roman DeLuca wanted something, he did not stop until he got it. Savannah stood from Eli's bedside and walked into her bedroom. The 2-pack suitcases were still waiting near the door. She stared at them for a long moment. Running again would not be easy. Roman had already found her once. He would find her again. But staying felt even more dangerous. Because if Roman wanted custody of Eli, there was nothing Savannah could do to stop him. Roman had money, lawyers, influence, and power. He could take Eli away with a single signature. He could put him in private schools, surrounded with security, and give him a life full of things Savannah could never provide. That was what terrified her most. Not that Roman would hurt Eli, but that Roman could give him everything she could not. The thought made her feel sick. Around midnight, Savannah heard a car door close outside. Her body went rigid. She walked quietly toward the front window and carefully pulled the curtain aside. The black SUV was still parked at the end of the road. But now there was a man standing outside it. Roman. Even from a distance, she recognized him instantly. He stood with his hands in his coat pockets, looking toward the house. He did not approach. He did not knock. He simply stood there in silence. Savannah felt her chest tighten. He looked older than she remembered. Harder. There was more gray at his temples now, more sharpness in his face, more darkness in his eyes. But somehow, he still looked exactly like the man she had fallen in love with. For a brief second, she remembered what it felt like to be safe in his arms. Then she remembered the warning on the mirror. Leave before it's too late. Roman remained outside for several minutes before finally getting back into the SUV. The vehicle drove away, but Savannah knew it would return. She barely slept that night. By morning, she had made her decision. She would leave Briar Glen before sunset. She started packing more clothes, food, medicine, and money. She gathered Eli's school records and birth certificate. She emptied the kitchen cabinets and loaded boxes into the car. Eli watched her from the hallway. He asked if they were leaving because of his father. Savannah tried to deny it. But Eli was smarter than she wanted him to be. He asked if his father was a bad man. Savannah looked away, because the answer was too complicated. Roman had done terrible things. He lived in a world full of violence and fear. But he had also once loved her more than anyone else ever had. And somewhere deep down, she still believed there was good in him. That was the problem. If Roman had been completely evil, leaving would have been easier. But he was not. He was the man she once planned to spend her life with. And now, he was also the father of her child. By late afternoon, Savannah had almost finished packing. She walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water. Then she stopped. Something was wrong. She was certain she had left the kitchen table empty that morning. Now, there was something sitting in the center of it, a silver watch. Savannah stared at it in horror. She knew that watch. Roman had worn it almost every day when they were together. It had been a gift from his father, one of the few possessions he truly cared about. There was no note beside it, no message, no sign of forced entry, just the watch, which meant Roman had been inside her house. And if he had wanted to, he could have taken Eli without her ever knowing. The real enemy was never outside Roman's empire. It was someone from his own bloodline. Savannah could not stop staring at the silver watch on the kitchen table. Roman had been inside the house. He had stood in the same rooms where Eli slept. He had walked through the life Savannah spent years building. He had left behind the one object she knew he would never lose unless he wanted to send a message. He could reach them whenever he wanted. That truth followed Savannah for the rest of the night. She locked every door again. She moved Eli into her room. She kept a lamp on beside the bed and stayed awake, listening for footsteps outside. But no one came. By morning, the watch was still sitting on the kitchen table, cold and untouched. Savannah wanted to throw it away. Instead, she hid it inside a drawer, because deep down, she knew Roman had not left it there to frighten her. He had left it there to remind her that he was close, and that he was not leaving. Across the country, inside his private office in Chicago, Roman was finally learning the truth about what happened 7 years earlier. Vincent Moretti stood across from his desk with a thick stack of files in his hands. Roman had ordered every old record, every security report, every missing piece of information connected to Savannah's disappearance. For years, nobody dared mention her name around him. Now Roman wanted everything. The deeper Vincent looked, the stranger the story became. Savannah's apartment had been broken into just days before she vanished. Several phone records connected Roman's cousin Vincent DeLuca to men who had been following her. A private investigator had also been paid to monitor Savannah's movements during the weeks before she disappeared. Roman sat in silence as he read through the files. His face remained calm, but the room felt dangerous, because Vincent DeLuca was not just another relative. He was Roman's cousin, his oldest ally, the man who had grown up beside him. Roman trusted him for most of his life. Vincent DeLuca had always been ambitious. Even as a teenager, he wanted power more than anything else. He believed the DeLuca empire should belong to him. He hated the fact that Roman became the face of the family, while he remained in the background. But Roman never thought Vincent would go this far. The more he read, the more obvious it became. Vincent had known about Savannah. Vincent had known she was pregnant. And Vincent had tried to make her disappear before Roman ever found out. Roman slowly lowered the papers. His jaw tightened, because suddenly every missing piece finally made sense. Savannah had not run because she stopped loving him. She had run because she believed his own family would kill her child. That realization hit Roman harder than any bullet ever could. For years, he blamed Savannah for leaving. For years, he convinced himself she betrayed him. Now he understood that he was the one who failed her. He should have protected her. He should have seen what Vincent was planning. He should have known the people closest to him were capable of betrayal. Roman stood from his chair and walked toward the large window behind his desk. The city stretched out beneath him, but he barely saw it. All he could think about was Savannah alone in that small house, terrified for years because of a danger that came from his own bloodline. Then he thought about Eli, his son, a child who had spent his entire life hiding because Roman failed to keep him safe. That thought changed something inside him. Roman had built his empire through fear. But now fear was no longer enough. Now he wanted revenge. Later that afternoon, Roman called a private meeting at one of his downtown buildings. Only his most trusted men were allowed inside. The room was silent when Vincent DeLuca entered. He looked exactly the same as Roman remembered. Expensive suit, perfect smile, calm expression. But Roman saw something different now. He saw the man who had destroyed his life. Vincent sat down across from him. For a few moments, nobody spoke. Then Roman placed a photograph on the table. It was a picture of Savannah holding Eli's hand outside the bookstore. Vincent's eyes moved a child. For the first time, his smile disappeared. Roman noticed it immediately. That was all the confirmation he needed. Roman asked him a simple question. Did he know? Vincent stayed quiet for a second too long. Then he gave the kind of answer guilty people always gave. He asked Roman what difference it made now. The room went still. Roman stared at him. Vincent finally leaned back in his chair and admitted the truth. He said Roman had always been weak when it came to Savannah. He said a woman and child would have destroyed everything Roman built. Rivals would have used them against him. Enemies would have kidnapped them. The empire would have collapsed. Vincent said he did what had to be done. He said Savannah was supposed to disappear quietly. He never expected her to survive this long. Roman felt rage building inside him, but he kept his expression calm, because men like Vincent became careless when they thought they were winning. Vincent continued talking. He admitted he had people watching Savannah years ago. He admitted he ordered the threats. He admitted he planned to take care of the child before anyone ever found out. Then he smiled. He said the biggest mistake Savannah ever made was coming back into Roman's life. Roman moved so fast that nobody in the room had time to react. He slammed Vincent against the table hard enough to crack the wood beneath him. The guard stepped forward, but Roman raised one hand. Nobody moved. Roman looked down at Vincent with murder in his eyes. Then he made a mistake. He let Vincent live, because part of him still could not believe someone from his own family had betrayed him. Roman ordered his men to lock Vincent inside one of the lower rooms until he decided what to do with him. But Vincent DeLuca had spent years preparing for this exact moment. 3 hours later, the building lost power for less than 30 seconds. By the time the lights came back on, Vincent was gone. Roman's men searched the entire property, but it was too late. Vincent had escaped. And Roman knew exactly what that meant. Vincent would not run. He would strike first. Roman immediately called every guard he trusted and ordered them to Briar Glen. For the first time in years, he stopped caring about secrecy. He did not care if Savannah hated him. He did not care if she screamed at him or told him to stay away. Because now there was only one thing that mattered: keeping Eli alive. As night fell over Briar Glen, Savannah finished loading the last bag into the car. She planned to leave before sunrise. Eli was upstairs packing his toys while she searched the house one final time. Everything felt too quiet. The air itself seemed heavy. Then the lights went out. The entire house fell into darkness. Savannah froze. A second later, she heard glass shatter downstairs. Her heart stopped. She ran toward the stairs and shouted Eli's name. No answer. Then she heard footsteps above her. Fast. Heavy. Savannah rushed toward Eli's bedroom, but the door was already open. The window was shattered. The room was empty. And Eli was gone. Roman is forced to choose between saving his Mafia empire or saving his own son. Savannah could not breathe. She stood in the middle of Eli's bedroom, staring at the shattered window, unable to accept what she was seeing. The room was empty. His backpack still sat near the bed. His toy, Dinosaur, lay on the floor beside the broken glass. One of his shoes had fallen near the dresser. But Eli was gone. For one terrible second, Savannah convinced herself that he had hidden somewhere in the house. She ran through every room screaming his name. She checked closets, bathrooms, the basement, even beneath the kitchen table. Nothing. By the time she reached the front porch again, She was shaking so badly she could barely stand. Then she saw headlights rushing toward the house. A black SUV stopped in front of the driveway. Roman stepped out before the vehicle had fully stopped moving. The second he saw Savannah's face, he knew something had happened. Savannah ran toward him. For years, she had imagined what she would say if she ever saw Roman again. She imagined anger, blame, tears. But none of that mattered now. She grabbed his coat with both hands and collapsed against him. Her voice broke as she told him Eli was gone. Roman did not speak right away. His face turned cold in a way Savannah had never seen before. Not angry, not emotional, just deadly. He walked into the house and looked around the broken bedroom in silence. He saw the shattered window, the missing child, the signs of forced entry. Then he noticed something on Eli's bed, a small black card. Roman picked it up. There was only one symbol on it, a silver crescent with a line through the middle, the DeLuca family mark. Vincent. Roman closed his hand around the card, so tightly that the edges cut into his skin. He knew exactly who had taken Eli, and he knew why. Vincent was no longer trying to erase a threat. Now he was trying to punish Roman. Savannah watched Roman's face and immediately understood that he already knew who was behind the kidnapping. She demanded answers. Roman finally looked at her. For the first time in years, there was no wall between them. He admitted the truth. He told her Vincent had threatened her years ago. He told her Vincent escaped earlier that day. He told her that Eli was taken because Vincent wanted to hurt him. Savannah stared at him in disbelief. Everything she feared had finally happened. Her son had become trapped inside Roman's world. She blamed herself. If she had left sooner, maybe they would already be gone. If she had told Roman the truth years ago, maybe Vincent could have been stopped. If she had protected Eli better, maybe none of this would have happened. Roman stepped closer to her. He told her none of this was her fault. Then he made her a promise. He said he would bring Eli back alive, even if it cost him everything. Within 20 minutes, Roman had gathered his men and turned Briar Glen into a war zone. Black SUVs filled the roads. Armed guards searched nearby woods, abandoned buildings, and highways leading out of town. Roman contacted every informant he had left in Chicago and demanded information on Vincent's movements. By midnight, they had their first lead. One of Vincent's men had been seen driving toward an abandoned warehouse district near the river several hours earlier. Roman immediately knew the location. Years ago, before Roman became head of the family, the DeLucas used an old shipping warehouse near the docks for meetings and weapon storage. It had been abandoned for years. Nobody would think to look there, which made it the perfect place to hide Eli. Savannah insisted on coming. Roman tried to stop her at first. He said the warehouse would be dangerous. He said Vincent would not hesitate to kill anyone who got in his way. But Savannah refused to stay behind. She had spent years running from this world. Now it had taken her son. She was done hiding. The drive to the warehouse felt endless. Rain poured across the windshield. Thunder rolled through the sky. Roman sat in the front seat with a gun resting beside him, his expression unreadable. Savannah sat beside him in silence. For the first time in years, they were together again, not as lovers, not as enemies, just two parents trying to save their child. As they reached the river district, the old warehouse came into view. The building looked abandoned from the outside. Broken windows, rusted metal walls, empty parking lot. But Roman knew better. There were guards inside, weapons, traps. Vincent never entered a room without planning 5 ways to escape. Roman ordered half his men to surround the building from the back, while the others entered through the main doors. The second they stepped inside, gunfire exploded through the darkness. Savannah screamed and dropped to the ground as bullets tore through old wooden crates. Roman pulled her behind a concrete wall and fired back without hesitation. The warehouse turned into chaos. Men shouted. Glass shattered. Metal echoed with gunshots. Roman moved through the building like a man possessed. Every second mattered. Every room could contain Eli. Every hallway could end in death. At one point, Roman found one of Vincent's men hiding behind a stack of shipping crates. He dragged him to the ground and demanded to know where Eli was. The man refused to answer. Roman pressed a gun against his head. Then the man finally broke. He said Vincent was upstairs. He said the child was still alive. Roman did not wait another second. He ran toward the upper level of the warehouse while Savannah followed behind him. As they climbed the metal stairs, another explosion of gunfire echoed below them. Roman's men were losing control of the building. Then Roman's phone rang. He looked down and saw one of his top lieutenants calling. The message was simple. A rival family had attacked one of Roman's casinos in Chicago. Several buildings were already burning. If Roman stayed in Briar Glen, he risked losing a major part of his empire. Savannah saw the look in his eyes. She knew what the call meant. This was the moment that would define everything. Roman could leave now, save his empire, and return to Chicago before it was too late. Or he could stay and risk losing everything he had spent his life building. For a few seconds, Roman said nothing. Then he turned off the phone and threw it against the wall. His empire no longer mattered. Only Eli mattered. That was the moment Savannah finally understood the truth. Roman did love his son, not because of blood, not because of legacy, but because Eli was his child. They reached the top floor of the warehouse moments later. A long hallway stretched in front of them. At the very end was a steel door. Roman could hear Eli crying on the other side. Savannah's heart nearly stopped. Roman kicked the door open. Inside the room, Vincent stood beside a broken window with Eli held tightly in one arm. A gun rested against the side of the child's head. Eli was terrified. His face was covered in tears. Vincent smiled when he saw them. He said Roman had spent his whole life choosing power over people. Now it was time to choose again. Vincent pointed toward the table in the middle of the room. On top of it sat a folder full of documents, property records, bank accounts, business names, everything Roman owned. Vincent wanted Roman to sign over control of the DeLuca empire, every casino, every business, every dollar. If Roman refused, Eli would die. Savannah felt sick. Roman stared at the papers without moving. His entire empire sat on that table. Everything he had built, everything his father left behind, everything men had died for. Then Roman looked at Eli. The child was shaking. Terrified, helpless. Roman picked up the pen. Without hesitation, he signed every page. Vincent looked surprised. For the first time all night, the smile faded from his face, because he finally realized something. Roman loved the boy more than he loved power. Roman threw the pen down and stepped forward. He told Vincent to let Eli go. For a second, nobody moved. Then Vincent shoved Eli away from him. Roman ran forward. Savannah screamed Eli's name. Roman reached for the child, and a gunshot exploded through the room. Years later, the child began showing signs that he may become even more dangerous than his father. The gunshot echoed through the warehouse. For one terrible second, nobody moved. Then Vincent collapsed to the floor. Blood spread across his shirt as the gun slipped from his hand and slid across the concrete. Roman had fired first. Savannah ran toward Eli and pulled him into her arms so tightly that he could barely breathe. He was shaking uncontrollably, crying against her shoulder, but he was alive. That was all that mattered. Roman stood frozen for a moment, still holding the gun in his hand. Vincent looked up at him from the floor. There was shock in his eyes. He had spent his entire life believing Roman would always hesitate when it came to family. He had been wrong. Roman slowly stepped closer. Vincent tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. For years, he had lied, manipulated, and destroyed everything around him because he wanted power. He had threatened Savannah, hunted a child, and nearly destroyed the only people Roman had ever loved. Now, for the first time in his life, Vincent looked afraid. Roman looked down at him without emotion. Then he turned away. By the time Roman's men entered the room, Vincent DeLuca was dead. The police arrived less than 20 minutes later. Roman's people handled the rest. By sunrise, the fire inside the warehouse had erased most of the evidence. Vincent's remaining men disappeared. Rival families backed away after hearing what happened. Nobody wanted to test Roman after that. He had given away his empire to save his son, and then he had taken it back through fear. In the weeks that followed, Roman dismantled almost everything connected to Vincent. Businesses were shut down. Accounts were frozen. Men who had worked for Vincent either disappeared or switched loyalty immediately. For the first time in years, Roman no longer cared about expanding his empire. He only cared about protecting his family. Savannah and Eli moved into one of Roman's private estates outside the city while things settled down. At first, Savannah did not trust it. The house was too large, too guarded, too different from the quiet life she had built in Briar Glen. Security cameras covered every entrance. Guards stood outside day and night. Expensive cars lined the driveway. It felt more like a fortress than a home. But after what happened in the warehouse, Savannah no longer believed normal life was possible. Not for her. Not for Eli. Not anymore. The first few weeks were difficult. Eli had nightmares almost every night. Loud sounds frightened him. He refused to sleep alone. Sometimes he woke up crying and asked if Vincent was coming back. Savannah stayed beside him every night until he fell asleep. But Roman changed too. He became calmer around Eli. Softer. He spent hours with him in the garden, teaching him how to throw a baseball, ride a bike, and play chess. He listened when Eli talked. He stayed patient when the boy asked difficult questions. And there were many questions. Eli wanted to know why Roman had never been there before. He wanted to know why they looked so much alike. He wanted to know why people seemed afraid of his father. Roman never lied to him. He told Eli that he made mistakes. He admitted that he lived a dangerous life, but he also promised that none of it would ever matter more than him. Slowly, Eli started trusting him. One afternoon, several months after the warehouse incident, Savannah stood near the kitchen window watching Roman and Eli outside. Roman was teaching him how to drive a small go-kart around the property. Eli laughed every time Roman pretended to lose control and almost crash into the bushes. For the first time in years, Savannah saw something she never thought she would see again. Peace. Roman walked back inside later that evening with Eli asleep in his arms. Savannah watched him carry the boy upstairs and place him gently into bed. Then Roman stayed there for several minutes. Sitting quietly beside him, Savannah stood in the doorway. Roman looked up at her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, because there were still too many painful memories between them. Too many years lost. Too much fear. But there was also something else. Love. The kind that never really disappeared, no matter how much time passed. Roman stepped closer to her. He told her he was sorry. Sorry for not protecting her. Sorry for not seeing what Vincent was doing. Sorry for every year she spent alone. Savannah looked at him and realized she had spent so long surviving that she forgot how to forgive, but she still loved him. Maybe she always would. That night, for the first time in years, they sat together in silence without fear standing between them. Months later, Savannah and Eli officially moved into the estate permanently. It was not the life Savannah once imagined, but it was safe. Roman kept his promise. He stepped away from much of the violence and business that once controlled his life. He trusted other men to handle things while he focused on Savannah and Eli. People still feared him. They always would. But around his family, Roman became someone else. Someone better. Years passed. Eli grew older. At 12, he was smart, quiet, and far more observant than most children his age. He inherited Savannah's calmness, but he also inherited Roman's sharp instincts. He noticed everything. He remembered details people forgot. He could tell when someone was lying just by looking at them. Roman tried to keep him away from the darker side of the DeLuca Empire. He wanted Eli to have choices. He wanted him to become anything except the kind of man Roman had been forced to become. But blood had a way of revealing itself. One evening, Roman brought Eli into his private office for the first time. The room was filled with old photographs, family records, and maps connected to the empire Roman once controlled. Eli walked slowly around the room, studying everything. Then he stopped in front of a framed photograph of Vincent DeLuca. Roman tensed immediately. He had kept the picture hidden among old family photos because he never wanted Eli to forget what betrayal looked like. Eli stared at Vincent's face for several seconds. Then he quietly asked if that was the man who took him. Roman nodded. Eli said nothing else. But there was something unsettling in his expression. Not fear, not sadness, something colder. Later that night, Savannah found Eli sitting alone near the library window. He was holding an old file from Roman's desk. Inside were records of the DeLuca Empire, properties, businesses, names. Savannah gently took the file from his hands and told him he did not need to think about those things. Eli looked up at her with calm gray eyes. Then he said something that made her blood run cold. He said people only survive in this world when everyone is afraid of them. Savannah stared at him in silence, because those were the exact same words Roman's father used to say. Years later, on the night of Eli's 18th birthday, Roman stood alone on the balcony outside his office. The Empire was smaller now, cleaner, safer, but it still existed. Savannah joined him outside and asked what he was thinking about. Roman looked through the window toward the office behind them. Eli stood inside alone, staring down at the old maps and business records spread across the desk. He looked calm, focused, interested. Roman did not answer right away, because for the first time in years, he felt something he had not felt since the night Savannah disappeared. Fear. Inside the office, Eli slowly looked up at the city lights in the distance. Then he lowered his eyes back to Roman's old empire and quietly began planning for his own future.